Hi, good morning. So today we're going to discuss um, week two for this quarter. And before we discuss our lesson for week two, um, I have a question here. So it says, I want you to look at the screen. It says here, in what direction do we read? So how do we read? Do we read from top to bottom or bottom to top? Or in what way? So if your answer is, wait, so if your answer is, we read from left to right, we read from left to right, then that's correct. That's how we read in English and also in Filipino. So we start from left going to the right. Now, my second question is, what do we call this kind of text? If we read from left to right, what do we call this kind of text? And that's what we're going to study today. I want you to look at the line in the presentation. Do you see that violet line there? So that's a clue of what kind of text it is. Okay, quarter one, week two. So our topic is entitled Textual Aids in Understanding Text. So for future researchers like you have to understand that in doing research, you're going to create bar graphs and pie graphs, different kinds of diagrams and graphs, but mostly it's line graph or bar graph that we use in research papers. And in your fourth quarter, that will be your performance task. So right now, we have to enhance your knowledge about doing research bit by bit. All right. So we have here linear text. What do we mean when we say linear text? Linear text, yun yung kanina natin nakita from the previous line. It is a traditional text that needs to be read from beginning to end to make sense. So this kind of text is the traditional text. Like, to give you an example, these are the novels, these are letters, these are short stories. So they are all in paragraph forms and not in any kind of like these are in paragraph forms, and these are in the form of stanzas. You have to read this from beginning to end to make sense. So you call it linear from the word line. So we read in a sense of direction. There is a sequence when it comes to reading those kind of texts. Line sequence. So when we draw a line, we start from left to right. That's how we read as well. You call it what kind of text? Linear text. So I have a question here. I want you to look at the pictures in the PowerPoint. Is this a linear text? So if we say that that in order for us to consider a linear text as is, there should be a paragraph, right? Because we have to read from beginning to end. Do you see a paragraph in the PowerPoint? Okay, you don't see paragraph in the PowerPoint. So is this a linear text? Very good. So it's not. So it's called the opposite, non-linear text. So this kind of text is not required to be read from beginning to the end because there is no path that has to be there is no path and it is non-sequential, unlike the linear text before. So what are the examples of non-linear text? The first one is called flowchart. So these are mainly non-linear text are those texts that is not in the form of paragraph or stanzas. So it is non-sequential. You can read it from end to the beginning or beginning to the end. So next is Venn diagram. For example, here in the Venn diagram, you don't have to like start from left to understand what is going on the right. So you can read passages or you can read the text from the right or from the left. Next one, we have graphs. This is called bar graph. And we have infographs. So you see, there is no paragraph. And this is a non-traditional text. This is called non-linear. There is no line. There is no sequence. There is no path. So I hope that's clear. So let us compare those two. So linear text, for you to be able to master it. Linear text, okay, I want you to look at the screen. You see, there is a paragraph. Versus non-linear text, you see, there are just a couple of pictures there. It's not written in a traditional manner. So a linear text, it has a sequential reading path. It should be read from left to right. While non-linear text, it is non-sequential and it doesn't need to be read from beginning to the end. How do we transcode linear to non-linear text? What do we mean when we say transcode? So when we say transcode, how do we transform a paragraph into graphs? I will repeat. How do we transform a paragraph or a linear text to a non-linear text to a graph? So from paragraph to a graph or paragraph to a diagram. So why do we have to do that? We do that because we want to simplify the statement. Sometimes we don't have to read the whole pages for us to understand. Sometimes using graphs and diagrams will make our lives easier to understand what is needed to be understood in a single glimpse. So, for example, here, how do we do this? So, an example of this graph is called flowchart. So, these are the tips on how are we going to do that. Okay, step one, of course, we have to read the text in order to get the main idea. How do we transform a paragraph to graph? Of course, you have to understand first what is it all about. Step two, you have to extract the necessary information for the visual presentation. So, after reading it, just have to select, extract necessary information. You don't need to copy everything. A phrase would be enough, or a single sentence is enough. You don't have to copy everything because there will be no difference. It's not simpler. And the goal for making this is to make everything simple, but accurate. Step 3, we have to remember to use keywords and phrases only. That's almost the same as step 2. You don't have to copy everything. Number 4, so we get the necessary information. After getting that, we classify them according to category. Which of the following belongs to the first one? Which of the following belongs to the second step or the third step? For example, transforming the ant and the grasshopper story. Do we start from the end? Of course, no. We classify it. Which among these paragraphs is the first to happen, the first event, and then the second, then the third, like that. And last one, step 5, is to make sure to use correct non-linear text to present information. So we don't just um, create or think of a non-linear text the way we want to. So there is an appropriate non-linear text to be used. So hindi po yun, okay, gusto ko Venn diagram dito. No. So there is a specific use for each type of non-linear text or each type of diagram. They are different. Eh ma'am, ano po ba yung pinagkaiba-iba nila? Okay, let's proceed to the next slide. So we have 4 in your modules, and that's where we are going to focus. So the first one, the first example of nonlinear text, the first one is called Ishikawa diagram, or what does it look like? It looks like a fishbone because it is also called the cause and effect or fishbone, cause and effect diagram or fishbone diagram or Ishikawa diagram. So what is this? How does this work? So this type of graph, we use this to emphasize the connection between different concepts. Okay, so in the screen, you see obesity. So this is called cause and effect because at the end of the fishbone, you will see the causes why there is obesity. So look at the first one from the left. Lack of physical ability. We get obese because of lack of physical ability. Second, activity. Second one is poor diet. Third one, it's genetics. It's hereditary. Fourth one, medical reasons. And each causes has its own specific causes pa, sub-causes. So you see, this is called cause and effect diagram because it shows the effect and causes of the main topic. And it's mostly used for reports in science. So next. This is the most popular type of chart or diagram. It's called flow diagram or flow chart. So we said a while ago that nonlinear texts are non-sequential. So this diagram is the exception to the rule. We have to have a specific sequence because this is a flow chart. Next, this is a sequence chart that shows series of events. The very fact that it says that it's a series of events, it means that it is organized from the first to the last event. So if you have concept that has steps such as process or sequence, this is the most applicable um, organizer or diagram to be used. So for example, what are the concepts that involves process? For example, in PLE, cooking. Okay, so the first one, we use flowchart for that because it's sequential. For example, in preparing chicken adobo, so the first step is to prepare the ingredients, and then second, third, and so on. So we also use flowcharts whenever we tell stories. So we don't start in the middle, and unless it is really what's written in the novel. You call it in medias res, but we're not gonna tackle about that. Third example, this is also one of the um, most used diagram. This is called Venn diagram. So what is a Venn diagram? Venn diagram is used to identify, classify, and categorize, and the most important keyword here is to recognize the similarities and differences of two or more subjects. So we have here the first circle. It says here tomato. So this diagram basically recognizes the difference between tomato and an apple. So in the first circle, we have tomato, and then the third circle, we have an apple. In the middle of them, that is where we put the similarities between the concepts, which is, in the example, the similarities of tomato and apple. They're both fruit, they are both round, and they have smooth skin. So just like that. We also use Venn diagram, for example, when we compare two characters in the story. So something like that. And the last part is called graphic organizer. Ay, iba pa pala yun, ma'am. Yes, it's different. That's why it's called graphic. Graphic means images. So what are these type of organizers? So these are visual displays to have key to content information. So this is used most especially for lower grade levels, for grade 1, grade 2, and kinder, so that these displays can capture their attention. So these provide learners with structure for abstract concepts. So that's it. And we don't really use much graphic organizer in high school unless it is really needed. But most of all, we use, but among these four, we mostly use flowchart and Venn diagram. May it be in other subjects. So that's it. So let me guide you through the learning task. So the learning task number 1 is um, you have to go to your module and go to page 10. So in page 10 you will see a graph, and then you have to understand the infograph there, and then identify. You have to read the graph, go over through it, and then read the questions. You can answer it. So for example, number 1, identify the number of the active cases of COVID-19 in the country. Where should we find the answer, ma'am? nandun po sa graph. Ang laki-laki nung number dun. So, you just have to write it using a complete sentence. Okay, learning task 2. What are you going to do? You have to go to page 11, read it, and then write the letter of your answer. So, read the question and then go to page 11. No, write your answer. So, next one, learning task 4. So, what are you going to do here? You have to figure out your favorite dish or dessert recipe. And then, you have to make a flowchart about it. So, paano to, ma'am? For example, chicken adobo. So, that's what I said. So, first, prepare the ingredients, blah, 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 wash the chicken, and chop the garlic, and so on. The last one is learning task 5. So, I want you to go to page 13. I want you to read the paragraph. Read the paragraph, and then after that, distinguish the differences and similarities of sharks and whales. And for the last one, learning task 8, so you're tasked to go to Google to search for the internet and get a sample bar, graph, pie chart, line graph, or pictograph. So what are you going to do? Go to Google and then search online, copy it, and paste it in your worksheet just like what you're seeing. And then explain it. Explain the graph that you copied from the internet. So, it says here that this graph, etong description na to, saan to galing? Saan mo yung kinuha, ma'am? So, the first sentence is from the title of the graph. So, it says here, the graph shows that 1 out of 4 teens are online almost constantly. And then, interpret the graph. Just like that. You see the first one in the bar graph, this one. So, that is 24%, right? So, nakalagay dyan, 24%, you will interpret it just like this. Look at the video as the guide. 24% of them are almost constantly, this is where I get it, almost constantly, and then, that's it. Just interpret it. And then, if ever you're gonna ask me, ma'am, wala po akong pang internet, pang search, wala din po akong, pang print. So, the best answer for that is you have old newspapers or magazines with you. You can draw it. You don't have to print it. I'm not obliging you. Hindi ko kayo sinasabi na i-print niyo yung gawa ninyo. But, there's a way. So, i-drawing ninyo yung graph. And then, after that, write it in a bond paper. Ma'am, pwede po bang kaming mag-paste galing sa dyaryo? Opo. Ma'am, kahit po ba hindi up-to-date yung dyaryo? Yes. I just want you to understand the concept of making graphs and interpreting it. Alright, so that's pretty much of what we have for this week. So I would like to end my presentation in this quotation. So the best way to predict your future is to create it. And it is from Abraham Lincoln. He was an American president, and it means that if ever you're wondering what your future will be, just look at what you're doing right now. If you're doing great, or like if you are being diligent or masipag in everything that you do, most likely you will be successful. So that's it. I'll see you on the next week. Thank you.